Dixon, and thank you for participating in this city council election forum. Let's introduce the people here from the Lima News. You met Doug Olson, our publisher. David Trinkers, our managing editor. I'm Jim Crummell, the editor, and of course Craig Kelly covers city council for the Lima News. Let's go over the ground rules real quick. This forum is more of a conversation about views you would bring to council, and it's being streamed live to our website, limeohio.com, and will remain on there throughout the election. We also will be publishing a story in tomorrow's newspaper about the conversation we have today. We will be asking questions, but you're also free to ask each other questions. We have a lot of ground to cover in an hour, so my apologies in advance if I say, hey, let's cut this off and move on to a different subject. And we'll leave the final 5 minutes for closing statements from each of you. With that, let's get started. And Teresa, we'll start with you, the incumbent. What keeps you enthused and running for city council?
Challenges, I mean, from the residents, the need and the calls that come in. Of issues of various types. You never know when the phone rings what that's going to be. I am pleased, to respond, return the calls. I usually go and confirm the issue, take pictures, communicate with the administration, email, phones, appearance. It's just a pleasure to be able to serve, and people realize, there's someone in government that does care and does respond, and they are heard. And I think that's the biggest. So I enjoy that for the last 8 years.
Jay, you're a newcomer. What makes you want to seek?
What made me seek running for city council is when I walk around my neighborhood where I've lived at since I was 6. I'm born and raised there on the 5th Ward. And when I walk around, the neighborhoods aren't the neighborhoods that I grew up in. We don't have people anymore that's like the Miss Laverdia Duncans or the Miss Deneen Geises or the Mr. and Mrs. John Adams who raised their grandchildren and their children across the street for homes from my home for years. The home that we live in is the home that my grandparents actually purchased, and my father was born and raised in that house. So the house has been passed down from generation to another. And so what made me start to seek the office of the 5th Ward Council is because I see a lot of needs. There's a lot of issues that aren't being addressed, or they're just being pushed by the wayside or swept under the rug.
What are some of those issues?
Some of those issues are crime and safety, blighted and revitalization, the need for seniors and the need to help the seniors, youth and development, and the education. And these are some of the concerns that I'm raising up on this campaign trail.
Question?
Yeah, so let's go back to Teresa for a minute. I have a question.
Well, for 8 years, I've always said I'm not a rubber stamp for anyone. I go with neighborhood associations. People give me their feedback on issues. I work well with not just the city administration, but the county elected officials. I have a good relationship with them, and communicate on issues freely. And like I said, by phone, email, or in person. We don't always agree, but we agree to disagree, and we go forward. But I've had a lot of success in these 8 years, and I'm proud of that record.
Thank you. Jamie, for you, you mentioned concerns about blight, safety, seniors. What would you do differently than is being done right now?
What I would do first is, as we all know, in the 5th Ward, which is normally the south and the southeast corridor of the city, for safety, build a better relationship with the constituents in those areas with the local authorities. Right now, we don't have that. We have a lot of pinpoint policing, which has lowered some of the crime rate in that area, and I believe Ms. Adams here would agree with me on that. But there needs to be some sense of, we need to hold the cops accountable for some of the actions that is taking place, or some of the regulations that they do. Building those relationships. So when you get a COP station that is in the ward right now, that borders the ward, I should say, in the NOVA or the Waterford apartments, get those out. Get those cops out of those offices. Right now, that office was opened up on August the 11th. If I'm corrected, please correct me. But they were open on the August the 11th. And right now, that office is now sitting vacant because he is out on administrative leave for personal reasons, for family. And so, do we get a substitute that goes into that police station? You know, because just like if myself or Miss Adams, when she was working at the time, if we took a day off or we had some time off or we had to take a leave, there was someone to fill in the position for us. Blighted houses. When you look at the records of the land bank, we have about 160 vacant lots that sits within the 5th Ward. We have 33 boarded up houses, according to the reports that I've gotten and seen. You know, and the list that I obtained had 333 parcels on that list.
So what would you do about the 160 vacant lots and the 30, if those numbers are correct, 33 board?
If those numbers stand correctly as the report that I've gotten, one, let's use some of those vacant lots. Let's use this for gardening. The reason why gardening is neat is the quality of life. We do know that on the south side or on that side of town, we have a save lot that sits within the ward on the east side. But as far as the south side of that, we know that the save a lot or the grocery market that was once there is no longer. So let's get those things into place so that the constituents in those areas have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. That there could stop down on diabetes, hypertension, things of that nature that goes on for generations to generations, and it also end up affecting and having you a chronic illness in your senior citizens in that area.
Can we go back to the pinpoint policing comments that Jamie made, and can we get your comment on that?
Well, I'd like to comment on both the blighted and also the pinpoint policing. In the 5th Ward, there are 2 stations. About a year ago, the first station was opened by Kibbe and Calumet. I questioned that location with the chief. I wanted something more central in the ward. In speaking with him, he said that the calls for service, according to his reports, were greater in that area for right now, for that point. And they had a relationship and a setup to be able to use the church that they're currently in. The other location, as my opponent has said, they just opened just a little over a month ago. And I was pushing for that. They had another location originally. Those talks fell through. These locations were picked and set up by LPD. So there was a delay in that second station, unfortunately, due to negotiations with another location. The officer is, as he said, on administrative leave. I've talked to their sergeant. I've talked to their lieutenant. There are officers there. Those that are patrolling are instructed to stop there, go in, do their reports from there, don't bring it back to the station. A lot of times they're on bike patrol, so you don't always see them. They're out patrolling. They're not to sit at that station 24/7, and I don't think anyone wants them to. There's numbers to call to reach them. They have certain hours of the week that they're there. Sergeant Garlock assured me that he would have some coverage because I said we cannot afford to go without coverage in both areas. Mm-hmm. I think we've all heard the number of the COP officers. I think there's 5 stations. We have 3 officers, and they rotate, and but their officers above them are doing the coverage when necessary. And as far as the blighted issue, I know when my opponent filed to run, he said one of the first issues he had was to eliminate the blighted housing and areas. My response is the last 8 years, the Fifth Ward has led the list in demos. Over this time period of 8 years, the city has demoed 779 structures. The Fifth Ward has 224 of them.
How many, Teresa?
224. Now that is just under 29%. That's leaving on average for the remaining wards, 6 of them, demos of 92 per ward, or 16%. A lot of this was originally funded by CDBG. We then got the NSP grant, and then followed that up with the Attorney General Moving Forward grant, which was a big boost. I have a good relationship with Rachel Gilroy and the Allen County Land Bank. We have driven the ward. I have here copies of the past demo list from the city and of her list, and we drove the ward for about 4 hours. What I would like to see, as far as a priority,
When was that?
maybe this time last year.
Year ago?
And I think it was before they'd gotten the grant. This was in anticipation. And I'm happy to say just last week on homes, the 1,900 block, we're in the process, and I know of 3 structures, but there's going to be 5. They're going to be taken down in that neighborhood. That street was the most I've gotten calls on. Unfortunately, under the city, with the limitation of funds, and they tried to be equal among the wards, which I understand, doing one house here and one house there wasn't getting it, because it would be frustrated for the homeowners. They'd say, he was just across the street and took this. Why didn't he come over here and take this one? Well, it hadn't gone through the legal process, and the deed hadn't been turned over, plus limitation of money. So with the Allen County Land Bank, again, I'm running with them 28% on their current list. But we rode around and had a great afternoon in discussing the issue of the blighted houses. I agree with the vacant. I've had success working with Land Bank. I've had about 5 residents buy the lot next door to them and expand their yard, play area, have some elbow room. 1-car garage doesn't cut it anymore for most families. They need 2-car garages. So I'm happy to say that, but I attend those meetings. And the reason I attend those meetings, and can, being that I'm retired and can do this full time, is majority on that list is from the Fifth Ward, because we lead the list. And so I have an interest for that reason. And then I take the opportunity when I come upon a resident that's called for my assistance, to inform them of the land bank, to educate them of it. A lot of them aren't aware. And I said, you can have this either through the city or through the county. One thing I think, neighborhoods, I've lived for 30 plus years at my home. When I moved in to a street that had the original owners from 1950 there. They have since, unfortunately, passed away. But majority of the housing is still home ownership. And unfortunately, the city, or the Fifth Ward, and the latest stats I have in 2015, home ownership is down to 38.9%. Rental is up to 61%. And that's where the continuity, the neighborhoods, have drifted apart.
Was that for the Fifth Ward or was that
That's Fifth Ward.
Fifth Ward?
The city itself is 45.4% ownership and 54.6% rental. We are higher than the city in the Fifth Ward.
Mhm.
I know my neighbors. Some neighbors have the key to my house. We help each other out. If someone's had surgery, we know each other's yards. We shovel each other's walks. We get each other's mail. I don't see that in other neighborhoods because I have actually seen, in the 30 plus years, I have seen streets change because of rental. And, you know, I've had people that are still homeowners in that area. They're like, what's happening? It's rental. And the homeowners and the renters, they don't reach out to each other because some might be gone in 30 days, 90 days, a year. So they don't get to know each other. There's no investment.
Let me change topics real quick. Go ahead, Dave.
Maybe a more natural transition. Then what do you think the answer is in terms of a landlord registry? And what's the best way to keep track of who's actually owning those homes and taking care of those homes for renters?
Well, Franklin County has, I mean, some people, I've read the comments, I've attended the meetings. The city presented to all of council a draft, a proposal, and it was sent to committee. I'm not the chair of the committee. I'm not on the committee, but I've attended the meetings. They have yet to address the draft. They have thrown the registration cost out there, the inspection cost out there, and fired everybody out. It's not written in blood, okay? It can be changed.
You're saying that you're referring to the committee.
Yes. They have not worked that document. And it's just a suggestion, a proposal. That's been frustrating to sit and see this. As I said before, Franklin County has registration. They have free registration to a point. I don't know if it's, you know, once a year you have 90 days to register. If you don't, then they cite you $50. I mean, the city of Lima did not invent this. Other cities are doing this. And I don't think they struggle with the housing like we are because of out of state. I mean, I've dealt with landowners, homeowners in California, Illinois, Minnesota, Georgia. I just got a call about 2 weeks ago from a lady that owns property on St. John's. And I have reached out to other, you know, with issues to the owners to say, I'm getting calls on this. And, you know, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Jamie, we'd like to get your views on the registration of landlords.
I agree with my opponent here when she states that it is just a rough draft or a copy that was sent out, and then the feathers was ruffled with other property owners and things of that nature. When you look at property or landlord registries, you look at Evansville, you look at Indianapolis, you look at Franklin County, and you see something that is tailored to their community for their community. So for the land bank that would be, or the land registry or the landlord registry for this area, I think that it needs to be tailored to our situation. That's just like if Mr. Crumble goes to the store to get a shirt and tie, his shirt and tie isn't gonna fit me because we have two different styles or two different size preferences because of our make of our body. And so for the make of Lima, we need to make sure that it's tailored to what we are dealing with. And I think that's where me and Ms. Adams here, we see eye to eye on. That before we start throwing, this is how much it's gonna cost for you to register, or these are the penalties and things of that nature, we have to make sure that it's tailored to our community. Now, with me working in housing as a service coordinator for Lima Towers, what I would say is, okay, if we're charging these fees, will these people rent go up? As we know, Ms. Adams said, a lot of these properties are rented in the Fifth Ward. But how many of those units are occupied by senior citizens that are on a fixed income? That is just receiving an SS check, a Social Security check, or that small pension that they may get from their deceased husband or another spouse. How much will they rent in Flatline? Those are the questions that we need to ask. Then we need to say, okay, if we're going to increase this, if it's going to affect the persons that's occupying that unit or that space, can they afford for that rent to go up? Will they be able to get the necessities that they need? Groceries? Will they be able to pay the light? Will they be able to get the maintenance of the yard? So that they're those landlords aren't hit with other penalties. And those are some of the things that I see as a service coordinator when we have people come in and apply for our housing. We just had a lady right there that lives within the 5th ward. She actually is letting her house go back to the bank because she's 70+ years old, cannot afford the maintenance, the maintenance, the grass keep, snow removal, and things of that nature. So she's moving into a facility like the Lima Towers or a senior citizen community, so that all of her expenses is covered under one umbrella. So when you talk about the landlord registry, I do believe that it is a great thing that they're trying to get something of that nature tailored for our, or drafted for our community. Because there was a house that sits next door to me and my family's. The house has been occupied. We've been there, like I said, since I was 6 years old, and I'm 29 now. So we're talking about 23 years. This house has had several different families in it. Only up until about maybe 2 to 3 years ago did we actually know that the reason why the occupancy was in and out every other month was because there was no furnace in the house. So if we get a landlord registry like this made available for our city, renters will be able to see, okay, is this landlord, are they reputable? Can they be trusted? Do I have the necessities to live decently and in order in this unit or in this parcel?
If I may.
Yes.
Thank you. A few years ago, the city got area agencies together that assist people with heating, electric, water, whatever. And they were shocked to learn they all have different standards of what is acceptable living space. Some did not care. If you don't have heat, you need to have running water. Some didn't care if you didn't have running water, you needed heat. So what the city tried to do was to get them all to agree to at least 10 things that would be required before it would be acceptable housing. And they achieved that list. That the agency said, we will hold the standards to that. Heating, some would have, people just have wood burning. Wouldn't have electrical furnace, gas furnace. Then the other issue with this meetings, and I know you've heard it as well, you know, your rent's going to go up $100 a month. That is such a misstatement, in that the fee is $100 a year. Okay? I talked to someone that spoke at the last committee meeting that has property in Athens, Ohio, where she has to pay an inspection fee every year and a registration fee. And she said, Teresa, I write that off as a business expense. I take the tax break. I don't pass that on to my renters. No one has uttered that yet. It's all the person that's living there is going to have to pay. So if you're running a business, I think you would know what your tax breaks are and the write-offs are. And that's a cost of doing business. But that has not been discussed or uttered yet. So that's what I want to see them get to. And we had a woman speak that has a large business in the city, multiple apartments. If I have to pay $100 for every apartment, I said, as they get into the detail, you know, a unit over 20 units, maybe $125. You know, I mean, we can work this. But they're not doing that. And I mean, I did an analysis of how many. A gentleman spoke and said, maybe the problem isn't the owners in the city, it's the absentee owners out of state, out of the county. And I ran some numbers on that because I thought my main issue is absentee owners to get a hold of and to find. They're either under a corporate name and hiding, or if you're lucky to get a name, you can't get a phone number like you used to because everybody's got cell phones and there's no yellow pages for that. I feel the issue is really ownership of owners, people that have either inherited the house and they don't care, they're not here, they don't have to live with it, look at it. And those are the ones we need to tweak this for. Get them on it, then slowly bring it into local owners. Because I think the biggest issue is the absentee out of the city owners.
Is that the majority of the units or no?
I would say it's a little above that, yeah.
Yes, I would agree with my opponent, that you see a lot of, even when you go into the Allen County Auditor's list, you look under the tax codes and you see who gets the taxes every month or every year or bi-yearly. And a lot of those are out-of-state owners. And I agree with my opponent again, where she states that, you know, a lot of the issues that I believe they're being raised are being raised by those absentee landlords. That because they don't sit out your front door and it doesn't affect you, that it doesn't matter if it affects me and Miss Adams or not. Because at the end of the day, you have to live with it, I don't. I live within a gated community or I live in a suburb in a cul-de-sac. And in that township or in that place of where I stay, the township or the board or the trustees don't allow it in their neighborhood. So we'll keep ours maintained over here and we just don't care about what's going on over there. Down the street from my home, there is 2 addresses there within the 500 block of 2nd Street, East 2nd. And there used to be some people that were renting to own those properties. Both of those houses were up for rent to own. Missed one payment, they were put out. With being put out, they were put out on a Monday, someone moved in Monday evening. House was never cleaned out properly. They didn't know if electricity was working properly in there. The next individual that occupied that unit, you know what happened? Was in there 2 months and was asleep. And the stove ignited itself, causing a fire in that unit. Put her and 3 other small children in danger. So I think that it's vital that we have a registry for the city. So that, and even going down to when Ms. Adams says, when there's an owner that owns several different properties, maybe put in maybe a $5 or $6 increase onto that. In Evansville and in the Indiana region, what we have seen is that we'll charge $65. Well, theirs is $5, a $5 register fee. But no matter how many properties you own, if you register them all at the same time, you pay that one $5 fee. But if you go in and you register those 7 properties 7 different times, you're going to have a $35 cost. So maybe that's what we need for here in Lima. It's saying, okay, $65 will cover this for X amount of units. If you have more than that, we'll go, okay, it's $55. For the next, what, say for instance, you have properties 1 through 10, we'll charge you the 65. After the 10th, the 11th property, we'll drop it down to 55. 11 and up, and you just lower the rate that way.
Earlier, Teresa, you mentioned CDBG funds. There's been some discussion about that money being used for salaries. Are we using CDBG funds properly or correctly? Do you feel?
I have chaired that committee in the past, in my 8 years of serving. I have sat on the committee as well. I feel we are. The city has never, in the 8 years that I've been there, has ever went up to the 20% that they're allowed by HUD to take from that for salaries. And that 20% is there to pay the city administrators to operate the programs that this grant is funding. So it's not like it's paying a secretary's position that's not involved in the program. These are the administration people that the government requires a lot of paperwork, a lot of reporting, and sometimes years after the grant, follow up, track, and that's what this money is used for. Now, this year, and I think the year before, they're getting close to the 20%. But our revenue in the city has gone down. We have not had a tax increase, and I'm not advocating one. But we have lost population. We have lost some jobs. Hopefully, we've gone through the recession in 2008. The mayor put a hiring freeze. He also, no one lost their jobs. There were no layoffs during that time, which, having been through one before I retired, that's not a good feeling. So I commend them for that, you know, for doing the hiring freeze, maintaining. Now we're up over 400 employees now. Also, the CDBG, and there's more regulations. It's taking more time for the administration to operate these programs. And we did divert money. I remember the first year Bradfield came to us, and the administration had turned them down and said, there's no way they can report this accurately and all this, to set up health fairs and cooking and working with the elderly. That program has saved lives.
Yes, it has.
People that had high blood pressure that did not know it, diabetes that did not know it, have gotten people to the correct health facility, and they reported to cover the lunches they gave the elderly that maybe, you know, on a fixed income. And I pushed for that funding when I was on that committee. I took away from one to give to them because I do care about the citizens, not just in my ward, but in the city that needs it.
Jamie, do you feel that the funds have been used properly?
I'm not going to contest what she says because as you heard my opponent say, she sat on the board. She's been the chairman for that committee before. So I'm not going to contest her on that. What I will say is I will agree with her on dealing with HUD. And the reason why I'm going to say dealing with HUD is because the position that I hold at Lima Towers is contracted in by HUD Housing. And it is HUD Housing funds that employs me and gives me a salary. And I do know, like Mrs. Teresa here said, Ms. Adams says, you have to document. As a service coordinator, which is equivalent to a social worker, documentation is the key. For HUD Housing, we just went through a HUD inspection, and even when they went back and look at my records for the documents that I take, you have to hold on to those about 10 years. Because within those 10-year frame, they can come back and actually say, hey, I need to know what happened or what did you report back in 2006, 7, which will be 10 years from now. And so there is a lot of red tape you have to cross to get HUD Housing funds. HUD just doesn't give you money and say, here you go, have a good time, and don't document or don't keep track of what you spend it on. Because they're coming back and they're going to ask you either today or 10 years from now, they're going to ask you, hey, how did you spend that money? Do you have the serial numbers for that item that was purchased? When you took it out of the system and you said that it was disposed, how did you dispose of it? Do you have a receipt of how it was disposed? And so I agree with Ms. Adams. If she states that the funds are not being misused, okay, I'll take that. The reason being is because I know how HUD Housing works.
Let me ask you this question. On a handful of issues, you've agreed with Teresa's position.
Yes.
Do you believe that the Fifth Ward is being represented adequately today?
Yes and no. Yes, because we see eye to eye on some of the same subjects, because we see some of the same issues talking to the constituents in the area. No, I don't. I feel like it's being unrepresented because as I was doing my campaign and walked through the wards, I've put a phone call into Ms. Adams and she's not returned calls. I had a gentleman yesterday stop me as I was cruising down 2nd Street within the 800 block. And he stated, hey, I live on Harrison and I've seen all your signs pop up. But I've tried to reach out to Ms. Adams several times on several different things involving the Meat City area of that corridor on Kibbe, or either on this end here where I am a maintenance guy and I have yet to receive a phone call. I feel personally that Ms. Adams picks and chooses who she wants to work with. She may disagree.
Thank you for that. Comment on that?
That is an absolute lie. He has said this to a resident on Essex about, the phone call. And that person informed him they're lying to you. Okay, I return the calls I get. I've returned every one. I will show up at your house. And I've had people shocked that I come to their home because they've never had that done before. And I have emphasized to people, a lot of people think we work for the mayor. And I straightened that out. I said, no, the mayor technically works for us. And I said, I tell people, you're my boss. I answer to you. And I do. And I resent that being even stated here today.
Can you comment specifically about, I think you used the words pick and choose, who?
I don't control who calls my phone. I have been called at 4 a.m. with a screaming voice on the end, with a flooded basement years ago. I have been called at 11 o'clock at night. I just witnessed this occurrence. I've been called on weekends. You call, if I'm not home, I have an answering. My number is public, and it has to be being an elected official. I return your call. But if you don't leave me a message, I have no way of knowing that you called. But I can assure you, I have returned every call.
If Jamie happens to win this election, what advice would you have for him?
Well, I would advise that, I don't know if he has read the city charter, know the limitations of council, and also the rules of council, what's going to be expected of you. I think a lot of people are misconceived that we just show up twice a month, yay, nay, and go home. There's a lot of work. The meetings are a piece of cake compared to what has gone in to get to that point. That is the finishing line when the legislation is before us. So there's a lot of behind the scenes. Fortunately, I'm retired. I do it full time, 24/7. And it takes full time. The Fifth Ward has a lot of issues. I'm excited about the underpass coming, finally. I'm excited about other improvements in the area. We just had Kibbe Street reconstructed. I just learned this morning that South Central is going to be grinded and repaved. I was there Saturday morning. I'd gotten a call late Friday night for the gentleman on South Central saying there's a pothole by the railroad tracks. I said, sir, I'll be there Saturday morning, because I wanted to take pictures and I couldn't do it in the dark. And I was there Saturday morning taking pictures, forwarded them on to the administration, had a conversation today, and there was some orange paint markings, and they were marking the area for the contractor to know where certain things were when they start grinding. So I go wherever I'm called. I have gone everywhere in my ward.
Do you know the number of residents in the Fifth Ward?
It runs around, we tried to equalize that at the last census, with Councilor Adams stepping down, who is no relation. We had to divide that ward up, and we tried to equalize it. And it runs about 3,400 to 3,600 per ward.
Okay. Jamie, to you, same question. If Teresa were to win this election and hold this seat, what advice would you have for her?
One advice that I would have for her is make sure your constituents know that you are the Fifth Ward councilman and not a council member that is boarding that ward. That is one thing I would say. If Miss Adams was to win, I would work with her, because she lives within the ward. She would be the head of the ward, or the face for the ward would be the voice. I would be willing to work with Miss Adams, just as well as if either one of you guys became our Fifth Ward councilman. I'd be willing to work with you. Willing to make sure that we together get things done for the community, for the ward. So one thing I would say is, Ms. Adams, make sure if you were to be the winner of this campaign, to make sure that your constituents know who you are.
If I may, we had 2 neighborhood associations. I attended those meetings.
Those are no longer.
Unfortunately, those that had it were the pioneers of the conception. They have stepped down. The new director over the neighborhood, a specialist, we have worked closely to try and get people to step forward. But again, you run into people having 2 jobs. One parent leaves as another parent goes to work. Leaves and the other parent comes home to watch the kids. People say, I'm too busy. I can't get away. I can't, but we're working it. And we take every opportunity. We've had 2 meetings just recently to try and reestablish, not so much Midway East, but under a new umbrella. We reached out to Cook Park because they used to have one before I got on council and it dissolved. But there's a need, and I know there's a need, and I've been a strong supporter of it. One thing I want to note, that at the last census, when we were doing this reconstructing, running border lines and changing, I inherited an area from Councilor Lowe, north of my ward, and I inherited to the west of me some of Councilor Glenn's ward. Now that happened to me 10 years prior to that in 2000. I was part of the 3rd ward, and I had a great counselor and had a working relationship, and she would return. I saw, her response to things, and I would never have challenged her because she was doing her job. But when this in 2000, the numbers had changed, so they redistricted to try and equalize the population among all councilors. I became a part of the 5th ward. And when I was watching council meetings on GTV2, I was looking at an empty chair at that table, week after week. And I'm like, there's no one there for us. There's no one speaking up. There's no one getting our piece of the pie, from the budget, from the projects, any of that. And that's why when I run, I say I'm your voice. 2 meetings in 8 years, 1 in each term, and they were due to a death in the family. I have a 99% attendance at council. I take that seriously. But what I did, I know how I felt when I became part of the 5th ward and felt I wasn't being represented. No one had reached out to me. I thought, I'm not going to do that. Out of my pocket, I had printed up a card welcoming those 2 sections to the 5th ward. My picture, my name, my address, the 2 neighborhood associations that were active at the time was sent to all those residents of those 2 sections. Now, I know the section of Derry, those people love Councilor Glenn. They've had him a long time. And he, would drive around, his name's on the car, I've been in that area, and those people probably don't even know I'm in that area. I have responded to people in that area. And I don't even consider it that area unless this is brought up, because it's part of the 5th ward. And this was my message to them, welcoming them. I didn't have to do this, but I know how I felt. So they've been contacted, and I've heard from the people.
How many residents were impacted by that move from Mr. Glenn's ward to the 5th ward?
I'd say under maybe, well, back then, maybe 500. Probably would be a large amount. I think I inherited more from Mr. Lowe.
Okay.
Probably closer, to 1,000.
Okay.
One thing, to switch gears a little bit, we've been talking a lot of residential issues, which of course in the 5th ward is largely residential. There are also some industrial, a few business areas as well. Thinking about these kitty streets, that's been recently having the tear down there at the
All right.
Dixon now. What's your approach when it comes to trying to exploit those areas in terms of, is there a role that you can play in terms of helping to attract and grow the, foster economic development in those areas?
I believe that in order to foster development in there, we have to be willing to sit down with those companies that may be willing to come into our community. But when a company decides that they're going to come to the city limits of Lima, they look at what is the housing market, what is the crime and safety rate, what is the education like in the area. These are things that I'm going to address on this campaign, because Lima Senior, which borders our 5th Ward, they have a vocational section. I'm a graduate of Lima Senior. I was in those programs there, in those hallways of One Spartan Way. We have to make sure that they're job ready. If those students decide not to go to a higher education, do they have the skill and the trade to perform a job where they can walk right in through the welding program or through the construction? Let it be food management or the STNA program, prepping them ready to go on to receive an LPN or RN. We have to make sure those things are right before we say, okay, we're welcoming this development in. But before they get here, we have to start getting ourselves ready as a community. Because when we're not ready, the chance passes us by. And that comes along with, I think the mayor put out within a 10-mile radius, there's umpteen jobs. But if we have kids looking into the city schools records, they have a K-3 program, which is reading level. We were at an F for years. We're now just getting up to a C level, which is average. So if kids that are K-3 are not up to the reading standards, they can't, when it's time to get ready to graduate, most likely a lot of those kids can't read. So you know what ended up happening? It ends up with a dropout rate for the 5th Ward, which is about 23.2%. What ends up happening when they're dropouts? They turn to crime. They turn to selling some sort of narcotic. In our ward, they use the blighted houses for safe havens.
Teresa?
Well, first of all, there's some limitations that city council member can do.
Sure.
I have a good working relationship with the county, economic development, the city administration as well. To stabilize neighborhoods is my way of trying to improve the area for marketing and to increase property value, to make people invest in their homes again. And that's happening. People are putting siding up now that this next door thing is down. But to get into the business part, we can't offer tax breaks. We can't offer, that comes from other parts of the government. We can support it, and I have. And we need the school support. Also in the 5th Ward, we have 3 schools, South, Unity, and Freedom. And I too am a graduate of senior high, and I went through the vocational program, drafting, designing, and then later graphic arts. I know how important vocational is. Some can go to a 4-year school, college. Some can go to a 2-year trade school, a 2-year technical college. Some can go right to the job from those programs. And back when I graduated, at the old site of Lima Senior, it was used as a dumping ground. You put the troubled kids in the back. And that's where vocational was. And now that mentality has changed. And I think a lot of that is due to Apollo. The success that has had with students. And I think it's changed inside of Lima Senior with the programs that they have. It's being admired. They're getting awards, DECA. I mean, I was in VICA. I mean, it's amazing the turnaround. But the recent demo of that warehouse on Kibbe, they've already got interest in that. They're going through Allen County Economic Development. They're going through Jeff Sprague and those people. And they want, you know, things certain ways, and he's working that. He has that authority. Now, if he comes to council and says, hey, we can do this, but can we abate his taxes or, you know, for 5 years, 10 years, while he's setting up, we'll look at it, we'll discuss it. I'm sure we will support that. And that means jobs, just like the recent reclaim on 4th Street.
Before we wrap up here, and we need to be wrapped up quickly, one question about police staffing levels. I mean, do you think our staffing levels are where they should be in the police department, or?
Personally, well, go ahead. Go ahead. You can go first. No, go right ahead.
I don't believe that they're where they need to be. Personally, when you have a third shift that may have 5 officers working for a city, it's not the staff. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. Just what was it last week? I want to say Wednesday or Thursday. Getting in the shower about the 9 o'clock hour. 15 shots rang out on the south end of Lima. I get fully dressed back up and I run outside. My dad was parking cars in the garage, and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, did you see that? Did you hear that?" And I said, "Well, no, I didn't see it, but I hear it." That was at 9:04 when I come out of the house. It was about 9:20, 9:30 before we seen lights. It was 9:11 before we heard a siren. So to me, if you want to clean it up, we have to have the proper policing in our neighborhoods.
Teresa, your thoughts?
I don't think any level is adequate. I mean, I think we all want more policing, you know, either on foot, in the neighborhood, a presence. And I would like to see more COP, you know, for response to be out there. I don't want a police state, but we need more. Now, already 70% of the budget, you know, is going towards safety services. That's fire and police. I'm glad the levels we have passed legislation to hire and that they've increased their manning. But at the same time, some of that's anticipation for retirements that are coming. So we're gonna go yo-yoing for a while until it again will stabilize, hopefully for the next 20 years. But yes, I would like to see more policing. I personally would like to see more on foot to get to know the neighborhoods, to, you know faces and names. But is that realistic? I don't know in this day and age. I hope so.
Okay, let's close up on, do you have any closing statements you'd like to share?
Yes. For too long, we the residents of the 5th Ward have been given a negative image, a negative representation. It is up to you, the voters, to make that decision come November 7th or the early voting starting in October. Either it be myself or the incumbent here, Ms. Teresa Adams. Know that we are the voice for you. And if you want to change, maybe I'm your guy for you. I vow to give you a positive image, not just for yourself, but for children and generations to come. I also vow to be the voice, but also the listening ear for you. And I thank you guys for your time.
Again, thank you all, for hosting us. I appreciate this opportunity. I think in the 8 years that I have served the residents of the 5th Ward, that I've done nothing but positive changes. From property values, personal to structural infrastructure, improving street lighting, roadways, sidewalks, too numerous to mention. But that's 8 years of hard work that I dedicated myself. I enjoy it. I enjoy working for them and representing them, and I hope to continue. There's some good things coming in the future that we have set the groundwork for now that I would like to see finish and be in office to do it. And I'm excited for the Fifth Ward. I think it has cleaned up immensely. I have supported the ward's activities of cleanups and other activities that churches have had and will continue. And I hope to be reelected and continue these next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.